There was no warmth when I woke up, just cold, sterile silence and the dull hiss of decompression. I gasped. My first breath in centuries burned like acid in my lungs. My heart stuttered, muscles clenched in panic. Cryostasis was never gentle, but this felt like being dragged out of death. My eyes fluttered open to darkness, not a void, but power failure darkness. Emergency red lights pulsed in slow, rhythmic blinks. The cryopod lid creaked as it retracted halfway, gears grinding like they'd rusted in place. I pulled myself up with trembling hands, dripping with thaw fluid, lungs heaving. I was naked except for a thin biosuit, fused to my skin like a second layer of tissue. My memories were fragments, images, and echoes. Earth's flag, screams, fire, a woman's voice calling my name. Except I didn't know what it was. I didn't know my name. The chamber around me looked like a tomb. A long corridor of cryopods, most shattered or overgrown with cables and frost. The walls were corroded, lined with black mold and fractured metal. Sparks danced from broken conduits in the ceiling. I tried calling out, but the only answer was the groaning of the station around me. Then I saw them. Dozens, no, hundreds of cryopods, each with a corpse inside. Some looked mummified. Others were just bones. One pod near mine had exploded from the inside, splattering the interior with dark, dried matter. Human remains. No life support. No fail-safes. I was alone. A soft chime echoed in the chamber. A flickering hollow interface came to life on the pod's side console. A distorted voice spoke through the static. Cryo status terminated. Subject designate 0. Vital signs stable. Neural resynchronization complete. The AI. At least something was still functioning. AI system Wraith online. Welcome back, operator. I coughed and tried to speak. My throat was sandpaper. What year is it? Temporal reference. Error. Stellar drift analysis in progress. The station shuddered. Somewhere distant, I heard metal tear like flesh. Warning, structural integrity compromised. Emergency power reserves at 4.2%. Where the hell am I? Orbital cryostasis facility designation. KR 9. Presumed location. Low orbit over exoplanet 1147 Azura. Facility status. Derelict. Human personnel. Deceased. Civilian population. 0. Communication uplinks. Disabled. Are there any other survivors? Negative. I gripped the side of the pod, forcing myself upright. My legs trembled under my own weight, weak from stasis. I limped through the corridor, brushing frost from cracked pod windows. No signs of life. Some of the dead had scratched words into the glass before they went. One pod had a message written in smeared blood on the inside. Don't forget. Make them remember. I stared at it for a long time. Then I noticed something else. Etched into the wall next to my own pod, barely visible beneath layers of grime and decay, was a crude engraving. It was the old Terran symbol for resistance, a diagonal line through a circle of stars. Beneath it, someone had carved a name, V. Stroud. I didn't know who that was, but I had a gut feeling that name used to matter to me. Wraith, I croaked. Who was I? Operator identity. Encrypted. Level 9 Black Protocol. Clearance required. Override it. Denied. Then give me a damn mirror. A polished alloy plate reflected my face when I pulled it from the wall. I stared. Male. Early 30s. Biologically. Shaved head. Eyes black as void glass. Pupils surrounded by faint rings of silver. Something had been done to me. I could see it in the unnatural symmetry of my jaw, the microscarring along my spine, the implant nodes beneath my skin. My muscles were denser than they should be. Bones reinforced. This wasn't natural. This wasn't even augmented military. This was engineered. I found a locker sealed by retinal scan. A quick glance and his later, it opened with a creak. Inside, a black bodysuit marked with the same Terran resistance sigil. Lightweight armor, hardened polymer plates, modular rigging. Old Earth tech, but advanced, still functional, still deadly. I suited up, piece by piece. The bodysuit adjusted automatically, wrapping around my limbs like a second skin. Power cells charged. HUD came online in my right eye. Then the station shook again. Harder. A klaxon warbled through the corridor, echoing like a dying animal. Hull breach detected. Deck 3. Atmosphere venting. The world was dying around me. I moved on instinct, letting muscle memory take over. I found a weapons locker, standard kinetic sidearm, a magnetic pulse rifle, and a shock blade still humming faintly. I took all three. My hands remembered how to load, prime, and draw. My fingers danced over the controls with surgical precision. Wraith spoke again. Operator, Concorde patrol vessel detected. Estimated distance, 50,000 kilometers. Trajectory, approach vector. Scanning. I froze. Concorde. The word made my blood run cold. I didn't know why, but my stomach twisted. Designation, GCV Harmony's will. Fleet registry active. Status, Enforcer class scout vessel. Affiliation, Galactic Concorde Authority. Warning, Concorde directives list Terran species as extinct. Contact may result in extermination protocol. Why would they exterminate me? Because you're a human. The pieces began to click. I wasn't just the last survivor of a cryoship. I was the last of my kind. A relic of a war lost to time. What happened to Earth? Accessing. Archived footage. Classified. Access denied. Override. Accepted. Playing final transmission from Earth. Timestamp 998. In epic. A hologram shimmered to life. I watched from the center of the corridor as Earth appeared. Blue, scarred, beautiful. Then I saw the ships. Thousands of them. Not ours. Concorde fleets. They rained fire. Planet crackers. Orbital lances. Bioplague dispensers. Cities vanished in seconds. Oceans boiled. The planet cracked like glass. A woman screamed through static. They're burning us alive. Get to the arcs. Get to. The feed cut. Transmission ends. Earth designation. Deceased. Status. Sterilized. Population loss. 99.99994%. I stood in silence, staring at the space where my world used to be. It wasn't just genocide. It was erasure. And they'd made sure to erase even the memory of what we were. I looked down at the bodies in the pods again. The people who died in their sleep. The ones who never woke. My ancestors. My people. Now I understood the message in blood. Make them remember. And I would. Wraith, I said, voice hardening, steadying. How long until that Concorde vessel gets here? 17 minutes. Give me a route to the hangar. Path calculated. Warning. Hull breach along optimal route. Recommend EVA maneuver. I clenched my jaw. So be it. As I climbed toward the airlock, my mind burned with a single truth. They thought they'd erased us. They thought they buried us in silence, in cold steel and forgotten data vaults. But I was awake now, and the galaxy was about to remember what a human could do. The airlock hissed open, and the cold vacuum of space slammed into me like a fist. I exhaled sharply, the breath puffing out in a brief cloud of vapor inside my helmet. The hangar bay was a cavernous shell of rusted steel and shattered consoles, half flooded with drifting debris and dim emergency lighting. Space dust danced lazily in the crimson glow. I floated out into the void, gripping the handrails of a twisted maintenance gantry. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the station's broken windows. Somewhere out there, the Concorde's patrol vessel was coming closer. I needed answers. I glanced down at my wrist HUD, Wraith's interface overlaying the ghostly remains of the station schematics. We were orbiting Azura, a quiet, forgotten exoplanet light years from the nearest human outpost. The station KR-9 had once been a deep space cryostasis hub, a coffin for thousands of frozen souls, waiting to be reborn on Earth's desperate last day. But centuries had passed, and no one had come, except me. I toggled the AI's data stream. Wraith, pull up station locks. Any signs of what happened after I was frozen? The AI's voice crackled through the comms. Accessing. Logs severely corrupted. Partial data retrieved. Last recorded entry. Emergency Protocol Omega initiated. Time elapsed since last contact. 256 Earth years. Omega. I frowned. Explain. Protocol Omega is a fail-safe lockdown sequence triggered upon catastrophic loss of external communications. It initiates cryo shutdown of all personnel and isolates station systems, designed to preserve occupants indefinitely. That sounded like a tomb. A slow death. I floated deeper into the wreckage, scanning with my suit sensors. The station was more than just broken. It was blasted, raked by energy weapons and scarred by firestorms. Large chunks of hull were missing, venting atmosphere and shuttling debris into space. A massive hole gaped open near the command center. Inside, I found the data core, an ancient supercomputer, flickering weakly in the dark. I accessed it, fingers trembling. Files began to download. Military communications, civilian messages, desperate cries all jumbled in corrupted fragments. Then a name appeared repeatedly, the Galactic Concorde. The Concorde, the empire that killed Earth. I felt a wave of rage rise in me. sharp and bitter like poison. One file was marked Final Report, Earth Incident. The audio clip was distorted, but I played it anyway. Ground forces deploying. Evacuation compromised. Casualties exceeding projections. Enemy presence overwhelming. Recommend full orbital bombardment. Code clearance. Read. That was the voice of a Concorde commander, cold and detached. I swallowed hard. Another file was labeled Civilian Transmissions, a flood of desperate voices recorded on the eve of Earth's fall. A woman, voice cracking. If anyone finds this, we're not the monsters they say we are. We fought for our homes, for our children. The Concorde calls us rebels, terrorists, but we're just trying to live. Her words echoed through my helmet speakers, wrenching something deep inside. Wraith, what was Earth's final population? Estimates indicate fewer than 400 survivors relocated to off-world refuges. Earth's surface declared uninhabitable. All known colonies classified as failed. I clenched my fists. The Concorde had committed genocide and called it law. Is there any evidence that humans fought back? Organized resistance. Affirmative. Multiple encrypted transmissions recovered. Resistance movements codenamed Phoenix, Liberty, and Hammerfall, all declared hostile by Concorde authorities. Show me. The AI decrypted a series of encrypted files, opening maps, battle logs, and encrypted manifestos. I studied the images, guerrilla squads armed with salvaged weapons, striking at Concorde supply lines, sabotaging orbital stations, even hijacking Concorde vessels. The last few years of Earth's fall had been hell on wheels. This wasn't just passive extinction. It was war. Wraith, were the humans truly defeated? Official records. Yes. Resistance movements terminated by 997 NE. Remaining population assimilated or dispersed. Assimilated. Biological and technological assimilation programs implemented. Survivors integrated into Concorde labor forces or cybernetic units. Records classified. The station trembled again, sending dust and loose cables drifting in zero-G. I had a growing feeling that these so-called survivors might still be out there. Or worse, the Concorde was using them as weapons. Wraith, search for any mention of Project Rebirth. Warning, classified. Decrypting. The AI hesitated, then unlocked a heavily encrypted file. Project Rebirth was a covert operation initiated by the Concorde to harvest Terran genetic material post-Earth sterilization, intended to create enhanced biosoldiers combining human resilience with alien technology. The implications hit me like a freight train. They hadn't just wiped us out. They tried to weaponize us. And me. I whispered, was I part of that project? Affirmative. Subject. Designate 0 is prototype for Rebirth program, embedded with nanotechnological combat enhancements and neural augmentation. So I was a super soldier, engineered to be humanity's final scream in the void. I floated back to the shattered command center, staring out at the empty black. The Concorde was coming, but I wasn't scared anymore. There was more to this story than genocide and ghosts. There was a war waiting to be reignited. As the last human, I wasn't just a survivor. I was the spark. The echoes of Earth's rage were still alive in me, and I was ready to make the galaxy remember. The hum of the station was a constant reminder that life here wasn't meant to continue. I floated through the dim corridors of KUR, 9 like a ghost drifting through a forgotten tomb. Every step, every breath, every flicker of my HUD screamed one thing. I was alone, maybe the last human left alive. But I couldn't stay silent, not while the Concorde hunted what was left of my kind. My suit's sensors registered movement, weak, almost imperceptible, somewhere deep in the station. A flicker on the radar, a signature so faint I almost doubted it. Was there someone else? Another survivor? Wraith, I said, voice tense but steady. Scan the station for life signs. Anything at all. Scanning. 3 weak biosignatures detected. Locations, Sector D, 14, D, 18, and E7. 3. I stared at the readings. 3 weak pulses scattered across this derelict coffin of a station. Show me. I moved towards Sector D, 14 first. The corridors grew narrower, more twisted. Walls buckled and cracked as if the station itself was dying. I reached an emergency medbay, lights flickering. There, in a cryopod like mine, but cracked open, was a woman, pale, almost translucent. Her eyes fluttered, confusion swimming in them. She looked no older than me, early 30s by the looks of her. Wraith, life signs stable, vital signs weak, but stable. Neural activity minimal. I dropped to my knees beside her pod, taking in her thin breaths. Hey, you're safe now. I'm here. What's your name? She opened her mouth to speak, but only a whisper escaped. Leah. Leah. I repeated softly. I'm Vance. She blinked again, eyes focusing slowly. Vance, I remember. The war. The end. Earth. I swallowed hard. This was a shard of the past. Someone who had lived through what I only knew through fragmented logs. Rafe, I said, help me get her out of the pod. We need to get her stabilized. Medical bay auxiliary systems offline. Manual override required. The med bay was in ruins, but I managed to reroute emergency power to the life support modules. The podhista's cryofluids drained, and Leah gasped awake. Her body was weak, but her eyes burned with something fierce. What happened here? She croaked. Not the time for questions, I said, helping her up. The Concorde is on their way. We don't have much time. She nodded weakly, steadying herself. We made our way back toward the station's central comm hub. I needed to know if we could contact anyone, any other humans, any allies. The station groaned beneath us, a constant reminder that every second here was borrowed. Rafe, can you access external communications? Anything to reach out beyond this tomb? External uplinks destroyed. Only short-range distress signals operable. Leah's eyes flickered with hope. Distress signals? I nodded. Maybe we can call for help, or at least warn whoever's out there. The comm hub was a mess of broken consoles and shattered displays, but I found a terminal that still powered up. Rafe, give me a broadcast channel. Anything to send a message. Channel established. Frequency open for 23 minutes before energy reserves exhaust. I took a deep breath. This is Van Stroud of the Terran Resistance. We are survivors of the Earth genocide. If you hear this, if anyone hears this, know that we live. We fight. We will never surrender. The Concorde has lied to the galaxy about our extinction. We are coming back, and when we do, it will be as fire. I hit transmit and leaned back, heart pounding. The message was simple but powerful, hope in a void of silence. Leah looked at me, a weak smile breaking through her exhaustion. You really think anyone will hear it? I have to believe they will. As the transmission looped, the station shuddered violently. An explosion rocked the far end of the station, some part giving way. We ran toward the nearest escape pods. The air was thick with dust and the metallic taste of ozone. I reached the launch controls, fingers flying over the panel. Rafe, prep pod for launch. Warning, structural integrity critical. Pod seal compromised. We don't have a choice, I said grimly. Leah strapped in beside me, her body trembling but determined. The pod shot out of the station, thrusting us into the cold void of space. I watched as KUR-9 shattered behind us, pieces drifting like stars falling from the sky. Where to now? Leah asked, voice barely a whisper. I glanced at the stars ahead, my mind racing. We find the others. We find Earth's ghosts. And we make the Concorde remember the cost of their war. Because this fight, our fight, was only just beginning. The escape pod shuddered as it pushed through the darkness, drifting farther from the ruin of KUR-9. The stars outside seemed cold, distant, indifferent to the shattered remnants of my home station, to the dying echoes of a lost civilization. Leah sat beside me, pale and silent, her eyes tracing the endless void like searching for a ghost that might never come. Silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable, until I finally broke it. So, I said, voice rough from disuse, where exactly are we headed? You said there were others. Leah looked at me then, eyes sharper now, with a spark that had survived centuries in stasis. There's a signal, she whispered, a faint pulse, not far from here. Another outpost, or maybe a rebel hideout. Somewhere humans still live. I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope, like a candle stubbornly burning in the dark. The idea that humans weren't completely wiped out was enough to make the cold void seem a little less lonely. The pod's AI, Wraith, projected a faint map in front of me, stars and systems glowing dimly on the translucent screen. Coordinates locked, I said. Let's see if this signal leads us somewhere better than this graveyard. The journey begins. The trip through space was agonizingly slow. Escape pods weren't built for comfort or speed. They were lifeboats, desperate vessels thrown into the sea of stars. Outside, vast nebulae painted swirls of blues and reds across the void, distant suns burning far away. The sight was beautiful, almost cruelly so, like the universe showing off its splendor while humanity barely clung to survival. Leah and I sat side by side, wrapped in silence, each lost in memories. Tell me about Earth, I finally said. What do you remember? Her eyes darkened with pain and longing. Before the war, Earth was alive. Cities thrived. Gardens on rooftops, rivers running clean. We had oceans and forests, skies full of birds. People dreamed. We had hope. I swallowed a lump in my throat. That Earth was a story I had only heard in faded logs and half-glitched holograms. And then the Concorde came, I said quietly. They came like shadows, Leah said. At first, we thought it was another conflict, another regime trying to impose control. But it was worse. Their weapons were beyond anything we'd ever seen. They turned our cities into ashes, our oceans into deserts. Her voice cracked, memories breaking her calm. I lost my family in the first wave. My parents, my sister, gone. I looked away, swallowing the grief that suddenly felt raw and close. The Concorde hadn't just killed us. They'd tried to erase everything we were. A ghost from the past. Suddenly, the pod's sensors blinked red. Rafe, what's that? I asked, heart pounding. Unknown vessel detected, approaching rapidly. The AI replied calmly. Leah and I exchanged a glance. Not Concorde? She asked, voice tense. No signature matches known Concorde fleets, I said, eyes locked on the closing blip. The pod shook as the other ship loomed closer, sleek, dark, with angular hull plating that swallowed the starlight. It was definitely not human-made. Rafe, initiate stealth protocols, I commanded. The pod's exterior shimmered with an active cloaking field, a technology we'd barely scratched during the war. If this was a reconnaissance ship, I didn't want to be its target. The unknown ship slowed and began broadcasting a signal encrypted, complex. Leah frowned. Can you decrypt it? Decrypting. Partial access granted. Message contains coordinates and a plea for aid. I activated the comm link cautiously. This is Vance Stroud, survivor of the Terran resistance, I said slowly. Identify yourself. Static crackled. Then a voice responded. Calm, measured, almost human, but with an eerie undertone. We are the Echelon Collective, not your enemies. We have been monitoring your distress signals. You are not alone. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Why should I trust you? I asked. The Concorde betrayed us. Why wouldn't you? The voice softened. Because the Concorde is a threat to all free peoples of the galaxy. We have watched their empire spread like a plague, consuming worlds and crushing resistance. We seek allies. Leah stepped forward, voice firmer now. How do we know you won't betray us, like the Concorde? Because we have suffered too, the voice replied. Our homeworld was lost to the Concorde's expansion. We survived only by hiding in the shadows. We offer you sanctuary. Join us, and together we can fight. The pod drifted quietly as the message ended. Trust and doubt. I glanced at Leah, whose face was a mixture of hope and suspicion. We had fought too hard, lost too much, to fall for empty promises. Wraith, I said, run background checks on Echelon Collective. Any known conflicts, treaties, or incidents with Concorde or Terran factions. Compiling data. Echelon Collective is a coalition of several non-human species, previously neutral in galactic conflicts. Intelligence reports indicate covert operations against Concorde interests. That's something, I muttered. But we need proof. We can't risk everything on a handshake. Leah nodded in agreement. Maybe they can help us reach the hidden human enclaves. Or maybe they're a trap, I added. The pod's AI suggested. I recommend cautious engagement and remote surveillance prior to any direct contact. I set the pod on a slow approach to the coordinates sent by the collective, which pointed toward a remote asteroid belt, hidden among the rocks. As we neared the coordinates, the pod's sensors picked up faint signs of life, small, stealthy ships darting between the jagged asteroids like shadows in the dark. Leah gasped softly. They're here. People. We followed the signal into a hidden cave carved deep into a massive asteroid. Inside, a sprawling complex of ships, hangars, and structures hummed with quiet life. Wraith, scanned for biological signatures. Confirmed. Multiple humans and alien species detected. The last vestiges of hope flared in me. The pod was hailed by a transport vessel, which docked us carefully. Inside the complex, I met others who had survived the Concorde's purge, scarred, battle-worn, but fiercely alive. They called themselves the Remnants, a coalition of humans and aliens bound by a common enemy. Their leader, a tall woman with steel-gray eyes named Commander Rhea, greeted us. "You're the first humans we've seen in decades," she said softly. "We thought you were lost." I stepped forward, feeling the weight of centuries in my bones. "We're not lost," I said, "just waiting for the right moment to fight back." Rhea smiled grimly. "Then you've come to the right place. But be warned, the Concord won't let us rise again without a fight." The burden of memory. That night, as the asteroid's artificial stars flickered overhead, I sat alone, the weight of the past pressing down on me. I thought of Earth, its oceans, its forests, its lost children. I thought of Leah, her haunted eyes and quiet strength. And I thought of the war, a war that had taken everything, yet somehow left the spark of humanity alive. This was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming our story, rewriting the fate the Concord tried to impose on us. The shadows of the past had not vanished. They clung to us like ghosts. But in those shadows, I saw the glimmer of a new dawn. The asteroid base hummed quietly in the artificial twilight, a fragile beacon of defiance buried in the cold void. The dim glow of the Starfield dome cast long shadows over the rugged faces of the remnants, survivors who had clawed their way back from the edge of extinction. It was a sanctuary, but more than that, a forge where broken souls could be reforged into warriors. I stood in the central command room, the hum of consoles and the murmur of voices filling the space. Leah was beside me, her eyes scanning tactical maps and data streams. The gravity of what lay ahead pressed on me like a physical weight. We weren't just running anymore. We were planning to fight back. Commander Rhea paced before the holomap, her gaze sharp as she outlined the strategy. I felt the eyes of every remnant in the room on me. I was one of them now, a symbol that humanity's spark still burned. The price of survival. Rhea's voice cut through the tension. The Concord thinks humanity is extinct, that we are nothing but dust and echoes. They are wrong. She pointed to a cluster of red dots on the map, Concord outposts, patrol routes, supply lines. These installations are vulnerable, but heavily guarded. We cannot simply storm them. We need precision strikes, sabotage, and most importantly, intelligence. Leah stepped forward, her voice steady despite the exhaustion I knew weighed on her. "I have experience with covert ops. We can use stealth drones, hack their networks, disrupt their communications. But we'll need more tech, more people." "We have some," Rhea replied grimly, "but not enough to reclaim our worlds alone." I nodded, feeling the truth settle deep in my chest. We were outgunned, outnumbered, and hunted like vermin. But we were also cunning and relentless. That was our advantage. Bonds forged in fire. Over the next days, I trained alongside the remnants, humans and aliens united by loss and fury. There was Kale, a tall, wiry alien with sharp eyes and a dry wit, who taught me the art of zero-gravity combat. There was Miri, a former Concord engineer who had defected and brought valuable knowledge of their weapon systems. And there was Leah, steadfast, haunted, but unbreakable. Together, we worked on plans to send shockwaves through the Concord's empire. Each mission was a thread in a larger tapestry, a tapestry of rebellion. One night, after a grueling training session, Liao pulled me aside. "Vance," she said quietly, "this fight isn't just about survival anymore. It's about legacy. We owe it to those who didn't make it, to our families, our world." I looked into her eyes, feeling the weight of her words. "Then we'll make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain." A mission takes shape. Commander Rhea gathered us again, the flickering holomap casting a cold blue light across the room. "Our first target is a communications relay on the planet Vetra 9, she said. "It's key to the Concord's control over the nearby systems. Disrupt it, and we blind their forces temporarily." The plan was risky. Vetra 9 was a jungle world, hostile and unpredictable. The relay was fortified, but with careful planning and stealth, we could infiltrate, plant charges, and vanish. I volunteered to lead the strike team. "We need precision, coordination, and silence," I told the others. "No mistakes." Into the jungle. The drop onto Vetra 9 was brutal. The atmosphere thick with humidity, the air alive with alien insect calls and the rustle of unseen creatures. The jungle was a living entity, dense foliage, tangled vines, and shadows that moved on their own. The Concord patrols were ruthless and heavily armed. We moved like ghosts, slipping through undergrowth, eyes sharp and nerves taut. At one point, Kale took down a patrol with a swift, silent strike. Miri hacked a security terminal to loop camera feeds, giving us precious seconds of invisibility. I felt my heart pounding as we approached the relay station, an imposing structure of steel and glass nestled in a clearing. The relay station. Inside, the air was cold, sterile. The hum of machines filled the space. We split into pairs. Leah and I headed for the main control room, while Kale and Miri planted explosives in the power core. The tension was unbearable. Every step echoed too loud. Every breath felt like a shout. Suddenly, alarms blared. Compromised. Miri's voice crackled over comms. Security lockdown initiated. Concord soldiers poured into the corridors, weapons blazing. Fight or flight. The firefight was chaos, blast or fire ricocheting off walls, sparks flying, the acrid smell of burnt circuitry. We fought with everything we had, our training and desperation driving us forward. Leah took down 2 soldiers with precise shots, her eyes cold with determination. I engaged in close combat, my fists and weapon working in brutal rhythm. Kale and Miri finished setting the charges, but the countdown was tight. Get out. Charges set. Miri shouted. We fled, heart pounding, as the explosives detonated, ripping through the relay station with a thunderous roar. Aftermath. Back on the asteroid base, we watched the explosion on the holomap, the relay reduced to a smoldering ruin. It was a small victory, but a beacon of hope. Rhea clapped me on the shoulder. Well done, Vince. This is just the beginning. Leah smiled faintly. We've sent a message. The remnants still fight. I looked around at the ragtag group, scarred, broken, but alive. For the first time in a long time, I believed we could win. The glow from the ruined communications relay still flickered faintly in my mind's eye as I sat at the edge of the command center's observation deck. Through the reinforced glass, the asteroid belt sprawled beneath us like a glittering sea of shattered rock and metal, silent, cold, and indifferent. Despite the small victory on Vetra 9, a gnawing unease had settled deep inside me. This war wasn't just against the Concord anymore. It was against the cracks forming within our own fragile alliance. The remnants weren't a single entity. They were a coalition stitched together from desperate survivors, humans, aliens, former Concord defectors, different species with divergent histories, cultures, and, most importantly, agendas. The longer I stayed with them, the clearer it became that unity was a fragile veneer, and beneath it, tension simmered dangerously. Leah appeared beside me, her presence steady as ever. Thinking about the mission? I gave a bitter smile, more like the mission's fallout. We've struck a blow, but not everyone's happy. She leaned in, voice low. There are factions in the coalition who don't trust the humans. Some see us as reckless, or worse, as liabilities. I clenched my fists, memories of shattered homes and lost families fresh in my mind. They don't understand what we've been through, what we still carry. Meeting the council. Later that day, the asteroid base's war council convened. The room buzzed with tension. Representatives from various species and groups filled the circular chamber, their faces grim and wary. Commander Rhea presided over the meeting, her voice commanding yet strained. Our strike on Vetra 9 was a success, but it has stirred unrest. We must address concerns before they fracture us. A hulking reptilian delegate, Grathcon, was the first to speak. His voice was like gravel. Humans are impulsive. This attack has provoked the Concord. We risk retaliation that could wipe out our hidden base. Beside him, a slender, insectoid diplomat hissed softly. We survive by caution and patience, not rash assaults. I felt Leah's hand tighten around my arm as murmurs rose through the room. It wasn't just distrust, it was fear, and a growing divide. Voices of doubt. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, meeting their eyes without flinching. We are survivors, I said firmly, not just of the Concord's war, but of extinction itself. We don't have the luxury of patience. Every moment we wait, more lives are lost. We need to strike hard, strike fast. Grathcon growled. And how many will die because of your impatience, your recklessness? That's the risk of war, I replied, voice steady. But doing nothing guarantees defeat. I'm not here to gamble with lives. I'm here to win. Miri, the former Concord engineer, spoke up next. The truth is, we have no choice but to act. The Concord grows stronger every day. Their fleets multiply. Their influence spreads. Our survival depends on unity and action. Seeds of discord. Despite my words, the room's atmosphere thickened with suspicion. Some delegates whispered to each other, eyes darting toward the humans. I could see it. an unspoken accusation that we were the source of danger, the weak link. After the meeting, Leah and I retreated to a quiet corner. They think we're reckless, Leah said softly, that we endanger everyone. I get it. I admit it. But if we don't fight, we're finished. Still, this distrust could tear us apart before we even get started. Leah looked out the viewport, voice resolute. Then we'll have to prove them wrong. Actions speak louder than words. A new threat emerges. Days later, an alert shattered the uneasy calm. Concorde Patrol Fleet detected, closing fast, Wraith announced. Estimated time to impact, less than 6 hours. The coalition scrambled. The fragile alliance faced its first real test, not from internal bickering, but from the relentless enemy looming at the doorstep. Commander Rhea addressed the War Council, her voice steel. Prepare defenses. Evacuate non-combatants. We hold this base, or we die trying. Grathcon growled. This is why we warned you. Your strike provoked them, rallying the remnants. The countdown to battle was a storm of activity. Leah and I worked alongside Kale and Miri, prepping defenses, coordinating units, and running simulations. The asteroid base was no fortress. It was a fragile refuge that would be torn apart if the Concorde unleashed their full might. But something shifted in the coalition. The threat forced old grievances underground, replaced by a shared urgency. Even Grathcon fought alongside human soldiers, his savage war cries a brutal counterpoint to our gunfire. The insectoid diplomats coordinated with alien tech crews, their former aloofness replaced by grim determination. The battle for survival. When the Concorde fleet arrived, it was a tempest of fire and steel. Fighters screamed through the void, beams of energy ripping into asteroids and hulls alike. The remnant ships scrambled into battle formation, sleek and desperate. I piloted a strike craft, heart pounding as I darted through debris and enemy fire. Leah was in the comms center, guiding fighters and coordinating support. The battle was chaos, friend and foe alike pushed to their limits. I saw comrades fall, heard Leah's voice steady even as explosions rocked the base. A massive Concorde cruiser loomed ahead, a beacon of destruction, sacrifice, and resolve. As the fight wore on, it became clear the base wouldn't hold indefinitely. Commander Rhea ordered a strategic retreat. Save what we could, live to fight another day. But retreat meant sacrifice. Kale volunteered to cover our withdrawal, flying his fighter into the thick of the enemy, drawing fire away from the fleet. I watched, torn between gratitude and helplessness, as my friend danced with death. Cover me, he shouted over comms, voice fierce. Leah's voice broke. Kale, but it was too late. Aftermath and reflection. The Concorde fleet retreated, leaving behind smoking wreckage and silence. The base was battered but intact. The coalition had survived, but at a cost. In the aftermath, the fractures within the coalition reappeared, this time tinged with grief and hardened resolve. I stood once more on the observation deck, Leah beside me. We survived the storm, I said quietly. But the storm isn't over, she replied. We're stronger, but the real fight has just begun. I looked out at the vast, cold expanse. We have to hold together, I said, or everything we fought for will be lost. Leah nodded, eyes fierce. Together, then, for those who came before and those who will come after. The shadows of the past still haunted us, but amid the fractures, a new unity was taking shape, a fragile, fierce hope that refused to be snuffed out. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 7 next? You said. Explain Chapter 7 into 1,500 to 1,700 words. ChatGPT said. Certainly. Here's a detailed, immersive expansion of Chapter 7, the hidden warfront in first-person narration, aiming for about 1,500 to 1,700 words. Chapter 7, the hidden warfront. The silence after battle is never truly silence. It's the kind that presses on your chest, the kind that wraps around your thoughts and doesn't let go. Even here, in the so-called safety of our asteroid base, the hum of machinery and the soft chatter of the crew couldn't drown out the memory of the Concorde fleet's assault, the chaos, the explosions, the faces of comrades lost too soon. But there was no time to grieve. Not really. The war wasn't just out there, in the void with blazing ships and deadly weapons. It was in the shadows, in the cracks where alliances teetered and secrets festered. It was a war within a war, a hidden war front that could destroy us all from the inside. The intelligence leak. It started with a whisper. Leah came to me late one night, her face pale under the cold glow of the terminal screens. Vance, we've got a problem. I sat up, The fatigue of endless watch shifts weighing on me but sharpness kicking in. What kind of problem? Intel suggests there's a mole in our coalition. Someone feeding the Concord information. Details about our operations, our plans, even our weaknesses. My heart sank. Betrayal wasn't new, but the idea that it was so close, within our own walls, was a knife twisting in my gut. How certain are we? Leah shook her head. We're still piecing it together. But the leaks have coincided with every close call we've had lately. The Concord seems to anticipate us more than they should. The Council's unease. The next day, the War Council met under a cloud of suspicion. The mood was darker than ever. Commander Ria's voice was sharp as she addressed the assembly. This betrayal threatens everything. We must root out the traitor before more damage is done. Grathcon growled, his reptilian eyes narrowing. It could be anyone. The humans, the insectoids, the defectors. Trust is a luxury we cannot afford. Murmurs of agreement and accusation rippled through the room. The coalition's fragile unity was cracking again, this time under the weight of mistrust. I stepped forward, feeling the eyes of the assembly on me. We need a way to identify the mole without tearing ourselves apart. Forming the investigation team. Ria nodded slowly. We will form a small, trusted team. Discreet, precise. Leah, you're in charge. Leah's eyes met mine for a moment. We'll need help. Vance, you're with me. I swallowed the knot of tension rising in my throat. We were walking into a storm, but there was no turning back. Tracking shadows. The investigation was a game of shadows and mirrors. Every conversation was weighed, every action scrutinized. Trust became a currency more valuable than weapons or ammo. We sifted through logs, communications, personnel records, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that could point to the traitor. The pressure was suffocating. Friends eyed each other sideways. Allies became strangers. One night, Leah and I found ourselves in a cramped data bay, running a deep scan on encrypted transmissions intercepted from outside the base. There, Leah whispered, pointing at a code sequence. This isn't Concord standard. It's a backdoor. Someone's been using it to funnel information out. The unexpected suspect. Our suspicions grew, and one name kept surfacing. Dr. Silas, a quiet scientist who worked on our tech enhancements. He'd always been reserved, focused on his work, but there were gaps in his logs and unexplained absences. We confronted him quietly one evening. Why have you been accessing secure files without clearance? Ya demanded. Silas's eyes flickered with something unreadable. I'm doing what's necessary to protect us. I have contacts, people who can help. His words felt like poison. Contacts with the enemy? He shook his head, desperation creeping in. No, with factions inside the Concord who want peace. They want to end the war. A complex web. It was a revelation that complicated everything. Silas wasn't a traitor in the traditional sense. He was playing a dangerous double game. Leah and I debated what to do. Could we trust him? Could we use his connections to gain an advantage? But the council was less patient. He jeopardizes our security, Grathcon growled. He must be detained. The tension escalated as factions within the coalition clashed. Those who saw Silas as a threat versus those who believed his actions might be the key to peace. Choosing sides. In the quiet of my quarters, I wrestled with the dilemma. Silas's actions were risky, but maybe there was a chance to end this war without endless bloodshed. Leah found me there, her expression weary but resolute. We can't afford divisions, she said softly, but we also can't ignore what Silas is trying to do. I nodded. Maybe the real war isn't just against the Concord, but against ourselves. A secret mission. Against the Council's orders. Leah and I decided to meet Silas in secret. The risks were enormous, but we had to understand his motives firsthand. In the shadowed corridors beneath the base, Silas revealed more of his plan. A fragile network of dissenters within the Concord who wanted to negotiate peace. But the Concord's leadership was ruthless. If discovered, they'd be executed, or worse. A dangerous gamble. Leah and I faced a choice. Expose Silas and risk fracturing the coalition further, or support his secret peace efforts and gamble on betrayal. We agreed to assist him, working covertly to protect his contacts and gather intelligence. The hidden war front was no longer just espionage and sabotage. It was a battle for the soul of both sides. The weight of hope. As the days passed, I felt the weight of that hope. A fragile, flickering thing that could either save us or doom us all. The coalition was fractured, the Concord ruthless, and the war far from over. But in the shadows, a new kind of fight was taking shape. one that might finally end the cycle of violence. I always believed that history was a distant thing, something locked away in dusty archives or fading holorecords. But as we delved deeper into the war, I realized the past wasn't just a backdrop. It was a living, breathing force that shaped every decision, every fracture, every hope. The night the past came back to haunt us started like any other on the asteroid base. The low hum of life support systems filled the corridors, punctuated by the distant clang of repairs. Leah and I were in the communications hub, decoding intercepted messages from the Concorde's deep surveillance net, trying to anticipate their next move. The screen flickered suddenly, and a hidden file began to decrypt, a message not intended for us, but for the highest echelons of the Concorde fleet. The contents chilled me to the bone, references to something called Project Genesis. The message was brief, but its implications were clear. The Concorde wasn't just after control or conquest. They were after something far more dangerous. The discovery of Project Genesis. The data packet was a fragment of something larger, buried deep in encrypted archives we had only recently begun to scrape. Leah and I worked feverishly through the night, piecing together what we could. Project Genesis, it seemed, was an ancient initiative from the early days of interstellar colonization, something forgotten or deliberately erased from most records. According to the fragments, it was an attempt to create a new form of life, a synthetic species designed to be the perfect soldier, the ultimate weapon. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The implications were staggering. If the Concorde had access to such technology, it could explain the increasing ferocity and seemingly endless waves of their assault forces. Shadows of forgotten wars. The more Leah and I uncovered, the more it became clear that Project Genesis wasn't just a relic, it was active. Somewhere, deep within the Concorde's stronghold, these synthetic beings were being manufactured and deployed. This revelation shifted everything. Our fight wasn't just against an enemy fleet or political regime. It was against a nightmare forged from the hubris of a long-lost age. I found myself haunted by questions. Had humanity ever faced anything like this before? Were we repeating the mistakes of forgotten wars? How many lives would be lost before the truth was uncovered? A mission born from history. We brought the information to Commander Rhea. Her expression darkened as she listened, the weight of leadership pressing down on her. "This changes our priorities," she said gravely. "If Project Genesis is real and active, we must find its source and shut it down." The Council agreed to a bold and dangerous mission: infiltrate a heavily fortified Concorde research station rumored to be the heart of Project Genesis. Leah and I were chosen to lead the team, a mix of stealth operatives, hackers, and combat specialists. The risk was immense, but so was the potential reward. Preparing for the infiltration. The days before the mission were tense. Every preparation felt like walking a tightrope. Our intel was limited, and the Concorde's defenses were unlike anything we had faced. I spent hours going over schematics, memorizing patrol patterns, and rehearsing escape routes. Leah coordinated our hacking attempts, ready to disable security systems at a moment's notice. In the quiet moments, I thought about the stakes. This wasn't just a strike, it was a chance to unravel the secrets that could end the war. Ghosts of our own making. As the ship carrying our team approached the Concorde station, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The sleek, cold architecture reminded me of stories I'd heard about humanity's early experiments with artificial intelligence. Stories of creations turning against their creators, of weapons that destroyed everything in their path. Our shuttle slipped silently into orbit, cloaked against detection. I glanced at the faces of my team, resolute but tense. "We go in, we find the truth, and we get out," I said firmly. "No heroics. We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for our future." Infiltrating the heart of darkness. The interior of the Concorde station was a labyrinth of steel corridors and humming machinery. Every shadow seemed alive, every corner a potential threat. Our team moved with practiced stealth, disabling sensors and bypassing security nodes. But the deeper we went, the more obvious it became that we were not alone. We found signs of recent activity, maintenance logs, guard patrols, and, disturbingly, cages. The synthetic soldiers. Then we saw them, rows of synthetic beings, dormant but terrifying, a fusion of flesh and machine, designed for war. Their eyes flickered open as alarms blared. The fight that followed was brutal and desperate. Our team was outnumbered and outgunned, but we fought with everything we had. I remember the cold efficiency of those synthetic soldiers, their movements precise and unfeeling, their attacks relentless. It was a terrifying glimpse into the future of warfare, sacrifice and escape. We managed to destroy the production labs, but not without cost. Several of our team fell, including Miri, whose quick thinking saved many of us during the escape. Leah and I barely made it back to the shuttle, hearts pounding, bodies battered. As we blasted away from the station, I looked back at the burning wreckage. We had struck a critical blow, but the war was far from over. Facing the future, back on the asteroid base, the revelation of Project Genesis sent shockwaves through the coalition. The nature of the threat galvanized us in ways words never could. The fractures in our alliance didn't disappear overnight, but the shared knowledge of what we faced forged new bonds. I stood on the observation deck again, looking out into the stars. The past had shown us a dark mirror, but it also gave us hope. Hope that humanity, with all its flaws and strengths, could rise above the shadows. Hope that we could fight not just for survival, but for something greater. The weight of what we had uncovered about Project Genesis was still settling when the Council called us back to action. The Concord's synthetic soldiers were not just a tool of war. They were a symbol of control, a dark testament to what happens when fear drives a species to desperate extremes. But even as the Coalition rallied around the threat, I sensed something else, something fragile, hidden beneath the steel resolve. Chains not just physical, but mental, were binding us all. I had always believed that the greatest battle was fought in the void, between ships and weapons, but now I knew better. The real chains we had to break were those that tied us to our fears, our doubts, and the ghosts of our pasts. To win this war, we had to start within. The aftermath and a call to action. The days after the mission were a blur of debriefings and preparations. Leah and I spent hours recounting the details of the Concorde station infiltration, trying to piece together everything we had learned. Commander Rhea gathered the council again, her voice steady but charged with urgency. The Concorde's use of synthetic soldiers has escalated the stakes. We must dismantle their production capability entirely. The plan was audacious. Strike at the heart of the Concorde supply chain by targeting a massive orbital foundry where the synthetic soldiers were manufactured and deployed. It was guarded by layers of defenses, both mechanical and psychological. The Concorde knew we would come for it eventually, but this mission would be different. It wouldn't just be about brute force. We had to break the chains, both theirs and ours. The chains of fear. During our briefing, I realized just how much fear had permeated the coalition ranks. Not just fear of the enemy, but fear of betrayal, failure, and the unknown. I had heard whispers from the insectoid allies about nightmares plaguing their ranks, visions of their own ancestors lost in wars long past. The humans, too, were haunted by memories of collapse and extinction. Even the reptilian Grathcon spoke of ancestral curses that made trust a precious and fragile thing. Fear was a chain wrap tied around us all, sometimes visible, often invisible. Preparing minds and spirits. Leah and I volunteered to lead the psychological readiness program. We knew the physical battle was only half the fight. Preparing the minds and spirits of our soldiers was essential. We held workshops, meditation sessions, and group talks. At first, many were skeptical, especially the hardened veterans. But slowly, walls began to fall. In one session, I shared my own story, the fear that nearly broke me, the doubts that kept me awake at night. I spoke of the importance of hope, trust, and resilience. Some faces softened, others stayed guarded, but the seed was planted. The orbital foundry mission. The day of the strike arrived faster than I expected. Our team was assembled, a mix of elite pilots, engineers, and the stealth unit Leah and I had led before. The plan was to infiltrate the foundry from multiple points. A frontal assault to distract the Concorde forces, while a stealth team penetrated the inner sanctum to plant explosives and disable the production lines. As we approached the foundry, the scale of the facility became clear. Vast arrays of docking bays, conveyor systems, and security towers sprawled beneath us like a metallic spider web. Breaking through defenses, the frontal assault was brutal. Our fighters engaged the Concorde's fleet in a furious dance of lasers and missiles. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers across the void. Meanwhile, Leah and I led the stealth team through maintenance tunnels, slipping past patrols and automated defenses. Every step was a test of nerves, every shadow a potential threat. In the heart of the foundry, we discovered more than just machines. We found captive soldiers, both humans and aliens, forced to work on the synthetic production lines, their wills broken by psychological manipulation and cruel conditioning. Freeing the captives, it was a moment that shook me to my core. These were not enemies, they were victims, chained not by metal but by fear and control. With Leah's hacking skills and the help of our engineers, we disabled the control systems that enforced the captives' obedience. The soldiers awakened, eyes wide with confusion and relief. Many were too weak to fight, but their spirits burned with a newfound spark. We gathered them, promising freedom and a place in the Coalition's fight, not as slaves, but as comrades. The sabotage, our window was closing fast. The Concorde's reinforcements were rallying, and alarms echoed through the facility. We rushed to plant explosives on the core reactors and synthetic assembly lines. Every second felt like an eternity, the tension mounting with every beep and step outside our temporary sanctuary. As we set the final charges, Leah's voice came through comms, calm and resolute. Charges armed. We need to move, now. The retreat was frantic. We fought our way back through corridors now crawling with Concorde troops. The captives, though weak, stood with us, proof that breaking mental chains could make warriors of the broken. Explosions and freedom. We made it to the extraction point just as the charges detonated. The foundry exploded in a cascade of fire and debris, sending shockwaves through the orbit. Watching the inferno from the safety of our ship, I felt a mixture of triumph and sorrow. We had dealt a devastating blow to the Concorde's war machine, but the cost had been high. The chains of fear and control were broken here, but countless others remained. Rebuilding trust. Back on the asteroid base, the return of the freed soldiers was a turning point. They were not only survivors but symbols, proof that even the darkest chains could be shattered. Integrating them into the Coalition was challenging. Trauma ran deep, and old wounds threatened to reopen. But with patience, care, and a shared purpose, new bonds formed. The Coalition's fractured trust began to heal. Slowly but surely, a new resolve. Standing on the observation deck, staring out into the void, I felt the weight of everything we had endured and everything still ahead. The war was far from over. The Concorde would not surrender easily, but for the first time, I believed we were breaking free of the chains that bound us. Not just chains of metal and weapons, but those of fear, mistrust, and despair. The fight was no longer just for survival. It was for freedom. The war was far from over, but something fundamental had shifted. After the destruction of the Concorde's orbital foundry and the liberation of the captive soldiers, the Coalition's spirit surged with a newfound strength. We had torn through chains of fear and depression, exposing the cracks in the Concorde's iron grip. The battles ahead would test us in ways we had never imagined, but I felt, deep in my bones, that humanity and its allies were finally on the cusp of something greater. The dawn of a new era was breaking, but it would not come quietly. Returning to the Coalition base, our arrival back at the asteroid base was met with a mixture of cheers and solemn silence. The freed soldiers, those who had survived the horrors of the foundry, were welcomed as heroes, but their eyes told a different story. Many bore the scars of captivity, both physical and mental, and the weight of their trauma hung heavy in the air. I found Leah standing by the communications console, her face illuminated by the flickering holoscreens. She caught my eye and nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of the battles we had won and the battles yet to come. The council convened immediately to discuss our next moves. Commander Rhea was resolute. The Concorde's backbone is broken, but they will not surrender. We must strike at their leadership and expose the truth behind Project Genesis to the entire galaxy. Exposing the truth. The plan was audacious and risky. We would hack into the Concorde's central communication network to broadcast the secrets of Project Genesis, the twisted synthetic soldiers, the forced labor camps, and the horrors inflicted in the name of control. If successful, it would shatter the Concorde's facade of order and legitimacy, igniting rebellion within their ranks and sparking sympathy across the galaxy's neutral systems. I volunteered with Leah to lead the cyber operation. It was dangerous. If caught, we would be captured or worse. But it was necessary. The cyber infiltration. Under the cover of darkness, Leah and I boarded the stealth cruiser, cloaked and silent as we approached the Concorde's central hub, a massive space station orbiting a gas giant. The station was a fortress, layers of defense and patrols. Our infiltration team split into two, one to create a diversion with a feint attack on the outer rings, and Leah and I to penetrate the core systems. The silence inside the station was suffocating as we moved through the dim corridors, shadows stretching like fingers on cold metal. Inside the heart of the beast, the core control room was a marvel of technology. Holographic interfaces swirling with data streams, control panels glowing with the pulse of the station's heart. Leah connected her hacking rig, fingers dancing across virtual keys as firewalls and encryptions tried to repel us. "Almost through," she whispered, eyes narrowing. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, suddenly, the screens flickered, and our access granted. We began the broadcast, a curated stream of evidence, leaked files, and testimony from freed captives. The truth of Project Genesis poured into the galaxy's networks like a tidal wave. The ripple effect. The broadcast exploded across systems, news channels, military comms, civilian networks. The impact was immediate. Within the Concord, fractures began to appear. Some commanders questioned their orders. Others staged mutinies. Civilians in neutral systems demanded answers and protested against their government's complicity. Across the coalition, morale soared. The long shadow of doubt and mistrust lifted, replaced by a fierce determination. But the Concord would not go quietly. The final battle looms. Intelligence reports warned us of a massive Concord counterstrike, a final, desperate attempt to crush the rebellion and reclaim control. The coalition mobilized, fleets gathering at the edge of the contested sector. I stood on the bridge of our flagship, heart pounding. "This is it," Commander Rhea said. "We fight not just for ourselves, but for the future of every species in this galaxy." The fleet roared into motion, engines flaring, weapons locking on targets, fighting for the future. The battle was cataclysmic. Fleets clashed in a dazzling storm of fire and steel. Ships maneuvered with deadly precision, lasers carving paths through the void. But this time, something was different. The coalition fought not just with weapons, but with unity. Tactics were coordinated, morale unbreakable. I piloted my fighter through the chaos, the adrenaline of combat sharpening every sense. As we pushed deeper into Concord space, the enemy's resolve began to crumble. Victory and sacrifice. When the Concord flagship exploded in a brilliant burst of light, a cheer erupted across the fleet. But victory came at a cost. Friends fell, ships were lost, and the scars of war marked every soul. I found myself standing among survivors on the deck of our flagship, staring at the stars with a bittersweet ache. The chains had been broken, but the price had been high, building a new future. In the aftermath, the coalition began the hard work of rebuilding, establishing new alliances, healing old wounds, and ensuring the horrors of Project Genesis would never rise again. I walked through the halls where freed soldiers now trained and healed. Their eyes, once haunted, now gleamed with hope. Leah joined me, her smile quiet but genuine. "We did it, together." I nodded. "This is just the beginning." Reflections under the stars. That night, I stood alone on the observation deck, the vastness of space stretching before me. The war had tested humanity and its allies in unimaginable ways. But it had also revealed something powerful, our capacity to endure, to unite, and to rise. The dawn of a new era was not just a turning point in the war. It was a testament to the strength of our spirit. And as the stars glittered with silent promise, I knew one thing for certain. We were ready to face whatever came next.